Hello friends, welcome to our lecture series on CSR. I'm going to take our session on CSR and Business Ethics. This is going to be part 1 of this topic, CSR and Business Ethics, and in this very lecture I'll be telling you about business ethics as a foundation of CSR and the way we group different theories of ethics in the name of consequentialism, deontology, human nature ethics, and also the different theories of ethics. So my dear learners, when we talk about CSR, we need to understand that what is the foundation of CSR. We talk about corporate social responsibility, but when we talk about CSR for corporate entities, in fact we are talking the social responsibility from the perspective of business matters. And of course these corporate entities, they are very much covered into the broad framework of business environment, and the foundation of CSR is nothing but the business ethics only. So this basically led to a decision of this very type of lecture, where we talk about CSR and business ethics, the way it is being founded on the very foundation of business ethics, and of course the different theories of ethics we are going to discuss in today's lecture of mine. Now when we talk about business ethics, we all understand that what is expected from businessmen, where business entities or businessmen, we expect from them that they should behave ethically, they should behave morally, they should take care of all the stakeholders. When we talk about business environment, we have two different layers of it. One is the internal environment, another is the external environment. And both of these environment, they form together. When we club them together, they are basically forming part of stakeholders. When we talk about supplier, customers, competitors, they are also the stakeholder. We have our suppliers, we have our customers, we have our employees, the government to whom we are supposed to pay taxes, and at the end the society in which we are living. So we have to take care of the social causes. We have to consider, we have to take into consideration the social welfare aspect, and that is where that is where the role of ethics or business ethics comes into the action. And when we talk about the expert's opinion, Rosamund Thomas argued that business ethics comprises at least 3 issues. She was looking at the business ethics from 3 different dimensions. One was that the value underlying the business corporation, such as your integrity, your honesty, your fairness. So what are the values on which your business corporation is operating, or business entity is basically working. The second one is the corporate code of ethics that goes beyond the separate values to become a set of principles and makes a clear statement of what the business corporation is willing to do or not to do. Or in nutshell, what are the do's and don'ts into our business enterprise? For me as a business enterprise, what are my do's? For what I'm willing to be known for, and what is our vision, what is our motive, that our business enterprise should be known for what kind of work culture, for what kind of name. So that is all we have to decide. That is another part or second part of the business ethics. So even don'ts are included, that what we don't do. We always we have to honor our stakeholders, and taking into consideration the welfare of all stakeholders is basically the prime motive of any business enterprise. And of course when we talk about the corporate code of ethics, it basically does so. And the third one, and suppose if I, before I go for the third one, I need to give you an example. For instance, when we talk about corporate code of ethics, a very simplest example of it can be forbidding your staff to take bribes. That in our organization, nobody is allowed to take bribe, and more importantly, disentangling what is meant by a bribe or other financial incentives. So when we are having this kind of work culture, what message do we want to convey? We wish to convey that we are basically acting as an ethical organization, and we believe into the values and ethics, and that is our core value that we are willing to inculcate, and for which we are supposed to be known for. That we are basically working for the welfare of the stakeholders, and for that no extra incentive is required. People are self-motivated. Those who are working with our organization, they are self-motivated, and they don't need any other kind of incentive. Now, what is corporate governance? The rule of the framework of rules which we have formulated for our corporate entities, for our day-to-day operations. It is the framework for the policies and procedures which govern the board of directors in a business corporation. So we have our own board of directors which is working for the day-to-day conduct of operations of our business of our business activities, and they are also supposed to be governed by certain framework of policies and procedures, or what you call as guidelines, and they are basically called as corporate governance, and they include non-executive directors and others who advise the board. So whosoever is working as what you call as KMPs, key managerial personnel, so anybody who is working for your business enterprise is basically known as KMP, that is key managerial personnel, and that person is supposed to be governed by certain framework of policies, procedures and guidelines, so that anybody or everybody who is joining the board is aware of the business policies, aware of the business ethics which we are supposed to follow as a business enterprise. So third one is the corporate governance, and corporate governance is basically an integral part of business ethics, as well as, of course, when we talk about CSR is not beyond the purview of our corporate governance, since the morality of the board and its individual directors that underlies these policies and procedures. So my dear learners, when we talk about the opinion of Thomas, she believed that the remuneration of directors should reflect the values of fairness and honesty. And here is the point where she asked, does the current trend of corporate social responsibility fit? Whether the current or present trend of CSR, what we talk about, is fit for business operations. Now it's a question by an eminent expert, that wherever we talk about the corporate governance, whether the remuneration of directors is reflecting the values of fairness and honesty or not. And nowadays that is again another point of discussion, that nowadays when we are talking about KMPs, their charges, and we are finding the salary to be very handsome. You find that amount to be very significant and very good also from the point of view of those KMPs. And there can be there can be different opinions about it. Some people may think that what is the point of paying this much of money, whereas another aspect is that we should pay them adequately, so that they should not think of earning from other sources. And of course they should maintain fairness and honesty. So in order to ensure that they maintain the values of fairness and honesty, they should be adequately paid. Even I personally believe that the payment of KMP should be adequate, sufficient enough to ensure the fairness and honesty in the business enterprise. And during the first half of the 20th century, when we look at the British writers, those who have been speaking and writing on business ethics, and of course the practitioners, they have regarded the responsibility of business company to its local, international and community as a key function of business ethics. So when they have been writing about CSR, these top shot authors of different books and articles, they have been talking about considering world as a community, considering your local atmosphere, your environment, your community as a key function of business ethics, and we should take care of all those stakeholders. So when we talk about this stakeholders approach, it is basically looking at the different stakeholders of business enterprise, and we should take care of all those people who are basically forming part of stakeholders framework. For instance, if I have to give an example, I would take B.S. Roundtree, Oliver Sheldon and Professor Urwick at the Roundtree Company, and Edward Cadbury, who basically pioneered a model factory in Birmingham, where all these experts, they subscribe to this idealistic view, and remember, they have also put their ideas into practice. So it was not only an idea they have given, or they have only spoken about business ethics, they have put this idea into practice also. and nowadays it is basically called as a best practice, which is being formulated, which is being used by different business enterprises. So what you call as best practice or what you call as corporate governance, that is basically founded on the framework or the foundation of business ethics. So business ethics is no different from CSR. Or you can say that CSR is basically it is one part of your business ethics, that you are taking care of your social responsibilities. When we talk about business ethics, it means that you have to be ethical towards all your stakeholders. Now, business ethics comes as a fundamental of CSR. At times, this question comes to us, that what is the fundamental point of CSR? What is the fundamental component of CSR? And when you have to define, I would say that the ethical treatment of stakeholders. Whenever you are talking about the stakeholders, are you treating them ethically? Are we treating them ethically? And on which we insist as being fundamental to the to the definition of CSR, relies on a philosophical understanding. So we have to be a little philosophical here, that ask a question to yourself, that while operating your day-to-day business operations, am I ethical towards all my stakeholders in terms of my treatment, the way I am treating my suppliers, the way I am treating my employees, the way I am treating my tax authorities, the way I am treating my lenders, or those who have borrowed money from our organization, if we are into that kind of business. So we have to ask a question to ourselves, that the treatment towards stakeholders, whether it is ethical or not. And I think that if we are able to answer to this question, we are very much working towards the betterment of our business enterprise, and in fact I would say that we are also taking care of our CSR activities. When we look at the literature of CSR and business ethics, we find number of thinkers they have contributed, and one of them is Donaldson and Warney, and their idea is slightly different from that of others. They believe that most ethical theory can be grouped under one of three main categories. Why I have chosen their idea of Donaldson and Warney? Because they try to summarize what others have said, what different speakers, what different thinkers have drafted, and what different thinkers have propounded. They have basically grouped them into three different categories. One is consequentialism, second one is deontology, and third one is human nature ethics. And when we talk about the different theories which are dealing with the ethical matters, or what we call as ethical theories, we can group them into three different categories. So before going towards different ethical theories, I would first be telling you about these three components, these three main categories, that what do we mean by consequentialism, what do we mean by deontology, and what is basically a human nature ethic. If we understand these three important categories, it is quite easy for us to understand the fundamental of CSR, from where it is emanating, from where it is originating. So let us start with the consequentialism. What is that? As the term itself is indicating, it is essentially looking at the consequence of human actions. Whatever action as a human being we are performing, what is the consequence of that? What is the outcome of that? And that is evaluated in terms of the extent to which we are achieving the desired result. Whatever is desirable from us, if we are able to achieve that, of course we are moving in the right direction. So consequentialism basically talks about the human actions, and we basically evaluate them in terms of the extent to which we have achieved desired results. So if we are able to achieve, of course we are moving in the right direction. If we are not able to achieve the desirable results, of course it is a testimony to that we are not moving in the right direction. And it is also referred as a teleological, which is derived from the Greek word teleos, meaning that end or purpose. So teleos is basically a word which is from the Greek dictionary, where if we translate it from that dictionary, we find that its meaning is end or purpose. So what is my goal? what is my motive, what is the ultimate goal. So it referred to teleological, which is derived from the Greek word, and it talks about the purpose, whether we are able to achieve the goal or not. And in such theories, if you would look at those theories which are basically based on consequentialism, you would find that these theories are basically talking about concept of right, wrong, and duty is subordinated to the concept of the end or purpose of an action. So there we talk about the concept of right or wrong, and of course the duty with which you are entrusted to perform your day-to-day operations, and whether you could achieve that purpose or not. And in this kind of theories, you would find that corrective actions must maximize the overall common good, and it is also known as the utilitarianism coined by the 18th century philosopher Bentham. Bentham talked about this kind of idea where we talk about the utility. What is the utility of this particular activity? And he formulated this term as an action is right if it produces the greatest balance of pleasure or happiness and unhappiness in the light of alternative actions. So he basically formulated that if any action you are performing as a business enterprises, what is the consequence of it? What is the result of it? If you are able to produce the greatest balance of pleasure or happiness, and if you don't do so, what is the outcome? What is the consequence? What can be the alternative action? If you don't do, you are causing unhappiness in the light of alternative actions. See, so if I have two ways, one is A, another is B, and I am planning to go for way 1, the route A, and that route A is causing the pleasure or happiness to all my stakeholders, then of course I'm talking about the good consequence, the positive consequence. Whereas if I go to the second route, that is route B, and causing unhappiness to all the other stakeholders, then of course I need to choose between the two. I need to choose the best one, which is causing pleasure and happiness to all the stakeholders. That is what he wanted to give with this kind of formula, where we talk about utilitarianism, and it talks about considering the action to be right if it is producing happiness for all the stakeholders. And when we talk about the modern day thinkers, they have further divided themselves into two groups. One is act utilitarians, and they basically talk about applying to individual action, and the second one is rule utilitarians, who should act according to a general rule which, if adopted, would maximize the common good. So one is talking about actions, another is talking about rules. So again, that utilitarians concept is being subdivided into two groups. One talks about action, another talks about rules, drafting rules, adopting rules. Although there is a powerful criticism towards this concept that they concentrate on the majority, whereby allowing injustice for a small majority. So if we are talking about that majority should be happy, or the out of, suppose if you are dealing with 100 people, 100 stakeholders, and 51 or 55 are happy, so we are somehow doing gross injustice to small majority, or what you call as minority. So this comes as a powerful criticism to this very idea of consequentialism, where we basically talk about the welfare of majority. So that can be taken care of by considering all the stakeholders at par. After this consequentialism, the second group, if you remember, I talked about is deontology. Now when we talk about deontology, it comes from the Greek word for duty, and what is crucial are the rules and principles that guide action. So we should be dutiful, or we talk about the obligations. When we say deontology, we look forward for compliance towards our duties, or what we call as obligations, and the rules and principles which are guiding the action. And these rules and actions, they fall into two further classifications. They are further classified into two different parts. One is that of the 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant. I'll be telling you about the Kant theory, what it focuses upon, what is the motto, what is the philosophy behind it, and in which year he gave. It focuses upon the duty and universal rules to determine right actions. So it was talking about, when Kant was talking about this theory, this theory of ethics, he basically focused on duty and universal rules to determine right actions. So we need to look at what is a universal rule. If it is universally accepted, then of course you are performing your duties in a proper manner, otherwise not. And here we come across two different types of norms. One is norm, another is hyper norms. I'll be telling you what is the difference between hyper norm and norms. So when we take care of the duties and when we are talking about the duties and obligations and considering the implementation or following compliance of those duties to be the part of business ethics, we basically classify them under the head of deontology. The second is known as the social contract approach. Now, what is social contract approach? Basically, it focuses not on individual decision making but on the general social principles that a rational persons in ideal situations would agree upon and adopt. So any rational person, from them we expect that they are supposed to exercise in ideal situations, they would agree upon and adopt those social contract approach. So here we don't focus on individual decision making but on general social principles, what is socially acceptable. Now, social contract theory, it came out of the writings of 17th century philosopher and the name of John Locke and the 20th century philosopher John Rawls comes here. And these philosophers, they are often cited because and why they are often cited by different researchers, because they try to establish universal principles of a just society. They were talking about a just society which is good for everyone, which is producing happiness for everyone, for all stakeholders. The argument of Rawls was that the rule should be established from a reasonable person perspective. And here when Rawls was talking about rules, I could interpret that he was talking about the principles. When we are implementing the accounting standards in Indian scenario, or nowadays we talk about IFRS, there also we have done the same. We are not taking care of the rules only, we are going principle based. We are giving the superior position to the principles, not to the rules. So rules should be established from a reasonable person perspective. It should not be very rigid. We should not be very rigid into our approach when we are drafting any theory for business ethics, because we have to be flexible, but meanwhile we have to take care of the compliance also, which is more important. So he was asking a question: which principle of justice rational persons would formulate if they were behind a wheel of ignorance, that is, if each person knew nothing about who he or she was. So what kind of rule we are going to formulate? Which principle of justice rational persons would formulate? That was the question by Rawls. That you have to think that without having any previous knowledge, what rule do we formulate? That should be the right way of drafting any rules. And that is why they were talking about looking at the rules from the reasonable person perspective, what you call as principles. So according to Donaldson and Varney in the moral evaluations of business deontologists, including contractarians, they would ask questions, they would ask certain questions, and those questions are here. The first question is, are the rules fair to everyone? Is it fair for everyone? Does it offers fair level playing field to everyone? So whether rules are fair to everyone or not, that is the first question. Second is, do the rules hold universally even with the passage of time? So suppose if you are drafting, if you are basically creating or formulating a rule today, and with the passage of time, 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line, it requires some revisions, or what you call as that it is not universally holding true. So the second question was that, do the rules hold universally even with the passage of time? So these two questions are supposed to be answered according to Donaldson and Varney whenever you are drafting any rules and regulations, or what you call as developing a theory in terms of deontology. You have to ask these two questions to yourself. Are the rules fair to everyone? The question number one. So you have to maintain the fairness, and second one is you have to ensure the timeliness of those rules, whether they hold universally even with the passage of time. So while drafting or creating the framework for this theory of business ethics, we have to be a little careful that it should have that scope of including the timeliness component whenever you are talking about those rules and regulations, whether they hold universal or they are universally acceptable or not, even with the passage of time. So deontology was the second aspect, and third one was human nature ethics. This is the third broad category under which we are classifying all the theories. So first one was consequentialism, second one we talked about deontology, and third one is human nature ethics. The third category, which is human nature ethics, as the name itself is indicating, what is the human nature? It assumes that all humans have inherent capacities which constitute the ultimate basis for all ethical claims. So this the propounders of human theories based business ethics theories based on human nature ethics, they basically assume that every human being is having some inherent capacities, and it constitutes the ultimate basis for all ethical claims. The Greek philosopher Aristotle, long back 2000 years ago, he was one of the most famous proponent even over 2000 years ago, and he talked about, in his opinion, human beings have inherent potentialities, and thus human development turns out to be the perfection of inherent human nature. So Aristotle was having this kind of opinion that it is the human nature which is going to define the ethics, and Donaldson and Varney explain this in terms of an acorn. Acorn is basically the oak seed, we call it as acorn, that has the natural potential to become a sturdy oak tree. It has the potential. Once it grows, it has the potential to become a sturdy oak tree, and its natural drive is not to become an elm or cedar or even a stunted oak, but to become the most robust oak tree possible. So they have taken, Donaldson and Varney, they have taken an example of an acorn which is having its inherent nature to become the robust oak tree to the possible extent, and they have taken this as an example. And just like that, we have our human tendency. Of course, humans are not acorns, but they develop through evolution, not only in terms of their physical potential, but also their mental, moral and social potentials. And when we talk about their actions which enhance human capacities are good, while those that do not are bad, unless they are the best among generally negative alternatives. Now there is a small story which is taken from the book of Michael Hopkins, and he has quoted in his book called Planetary Bargain, and where he conveys the thinking of Aristotle on human ethics. And towards the end of 19th century, an Oxford tradesman observed how his competitors were cheating and swindling at every opportunity. And what happened? He agonized about how he could avoid doing the same without going out of business. So eventually the tradesman could muster his strength, and he screwed up his courage and took his problem to the formidable Benjamin Jowett, the master of Balliol College. And Jowett paused only for a moment before replying, and he said, cheat as little as you can. So the moral of the story is that that there are no hard and fast rules for ethical good practice. It is up to you to decide what is ethical, what is unethical. In fact, most university business schools that teach ethics, such as the top-rated Darden School of Business in US, from where we cite its two famous authors, Donaldson and Varney, they have recognized the difficulties and they use case studies to illustrate how ethics can be treated in business. So my dear learners, with this I have tried to tell you the three broad groups under which different theories of business ethics have been propounded, and in the next lecture of mine I'll be telling you about different theories of business ethics and how they are linked with the CSR. I hope you must have enjoyed today's lecture of mine. Thank you so much.